Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're well. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and today is Wednesday. It is September the 7th, and we're getting ready for Parshas Seitzei. I want to start by thanking you for accommodating this new time. I know my teaching schedule at the school this year is different than it's been in the past, so I'm sorry about this, but this is the time that's going to work on Wednesdays, and I really appreciate everybody's flexibility. So thank you very much. It's good to be back, and I'm sorry I missed the past couple sessions. But let's jump right in. We're getting ready for Parshas Seitzei, and I wanted to share a few items that I saw in the Parsha this week that definitely helped me gain a better appreciation for the Parsha. And I hope these are things you might appreciate as well. So let's see, there's an item that comes up in Parshas Seitzei this week, and it's going to be very similar to something that came up in Sefer Shemos in Parshas Mishpatim. So let's look at that, and we'll see some sources on it. So the pasuk tells us, it's in Devarim, it's Perach Chav Beis, chapter 22. The pasuk says, pasuk Daled, Lo siras chamor achicha, I should not observe my fellow Jews' donkey or his shoro or his ox, noflim baderach, that they fell under their loads on the road, and then I should ignore them. Come on, that's not right. I see my friend is struggling. His beast of burden, whether that's his donkey, whether it's his ox, was carrying a lot of stuff, and it seems to have collapsed under the load. He needs my assistance. So I shouldn't just walk away. Rather, hakem takim imo. Rather, you should pick up the load with him. I see he's struggling, trying to get everything back on track. I should offer a helping hand. That's what the pasuk tells us here, and we'll soon see very, very similar pasuk earlier in the Torah in Sefer Shemos in Parshas Mishpatim. Let's take a look, though, at a beautiful idea from the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim on the Torah and this week's Parsha, going on this mitzvah of Hakem Takim Imo, that I should assist my friend in getting the animal upright and its load loaded again. He writes as follows: Look what the pasuk said. The pasuk doesn't say it's my sole responsibility, hakem takim lo, that I have to single-handedly help him get his animal upright and loaded again. It says imo, meaning that if I see the owner is struggling with this, I have to assist, I have to get involved. So he says as follows: my obligation is to assist the owner with getting the load back onto his donkey. It says help him, help along with him. This would exclude, let's say the owners just abandoned their animal. The Amar Lo, and he says, the owner's just sitting there, he's sitting in the shade having a cold drink. And he sees me, he goes, look, the Torah said there's a mitzvah on you that if you see my donkey struggling under its load to help, so you help, I'm not going to help. That's what, let's say the owner would have that attitude, pater, I don't have to get involved. Shenemer imo, the Torah said imo, that if the owner's already helping, then I have to get involved and help. But if the owner is not doing anything, I don't have to do anything. Kedisa b'sifri, that's what the Medrash says. So the Medrash is very clear that there's responsibility on the part of the owner to play a role. You can't just give this responsibility to everybody else. It's primarily the owner's responsibility. If the owner's doing something, I have to get involved to assist. But that's my job, to assist, not to do this single-handedly. So look what the Chafetz Chaim does with this. And this is how it works with all matters that a person deals with in life. If I try to sanctify myself down here in this world, then God will get involved and say, oh, you're already putting in the effort? So then I'll put in the effort to help you. If a person, let's say, requests at the end of davening, which we say at the end of Shemona Esrei, we ask Hashem, help me protect the words that come out of my mouth, that I shouldn't speak evil, I shouldn't speak lies. If I'm making an effort to be careful about this, then it makes sense that God would get involved to help me. But if a person just casts this over his shoulder, it makes no effort to be careful in these areas, How can I request this from God? So the Chafetz Chaim is making such a beautiful extension. The Torah tells us Hakem Takim Imo, that primarily it's the owner's obligation to right his fallen donkey. And if the owner is doing something, then I have to get involved and assist. The Medrash says that if the owner took an attitude that he's just sitting off to the side, he's not doing anything, and he wants to put it all on me, I don't have to get involved. My job is to assist. So the Chafetz Chaim says that's the way it also works when we ask Hashem for help. If I'm asking Hashem for assistance, God's going to say, well, are you putting in an effort? Are you putting in the effort for all the things you're asking? Hashem will say, males, if you're putting in the effort, then I'll help. But if you're not putting in the effort, what are you coming to me for? Look at the next paragraph. We also ask in our davening, we ask God, do me a favor, enlighten my eyes with your Torah. In other words, help me understand your Torah. If we don't sit down after davening to try to learn some Torah, as they ain't then God's, why would God accept our prayers? What's this comparable to? Let's say I go over to my friend and I say, I need to borrow $100. And the lender agrees. And he says, okay, come to my house at Wednesday at 3 p.m. And at that place, at that location, I'll give you the loan that you asked for. Let's say the person who wanted to take the loan is too lazy and he never shows up. He can't have any complaints on the loaner that he never made the loan. It was the fellow who wanted the loan, the lender. It was his job to go to the house, and he never went to the house. How could he have a complaint? The same matter when it comes to us. We ask of God. We ask God to open our eyes, help us understand our learning, our Torah learning. God will answer. It's a very nice request that you're asking. So sit down, take out a sefer and start to learn. If you put in the effort, then I'll open your eyes to help you understand the Torah learning. But if a person just runs out of shul to take care of whatever their work, whatever their tasks of the day are, they know some lev Torah, and he never says, okay, I'm going to try to find some time to engage in Torah study, then God doesn't accept the tefillah. It's just a wasted prayer. It's someone who's asking for something with his mouth, with his lips, but his heart's not in it. So the Chafetz Chaim is saying, if you look at what this pasuk is teaching us and what the Medrash says about it, what the Torah is telling us is that, again, the primary responsibility is that a person has to help themselves. It's the owner's responsibility to make the donkey go upright and to help with the load. If the owner's already doing that, then me, as the onlooker, I have to get involved and assist. But I don't have to do that if the owner has abandoned the project. If the owner's doing it, then I have to get involved. So the Chafetz Chaim says the same thing. That's the way Hashem works with us. We ask Hashem for all sorts of favors. And Hashem's first response is, are you putting in your work? The primary obligation of helping oneself is on oneself. So if we're doing something about it, then Hashem could say, okay, you're already putting in your work. I'll give you an assist. But if we're not doing anything about it, then where do we get off turning to Hashem for help? You know, there's that joke that's always out there, but it's so true. That joke about the fellow who is saying he's davening to Hashem to win the lottery, and he's davening 24 hours a day, he's saying Tehillim and everything, and he doesn't win the lottery. And he's got a complaint. He says, I don't understand, God. I was engaged in so much tefillah and Tehillim to win the lottery, and I didn't win. And finally, God sends him a message. Did you buy a ticket? We have to put in our efforts. If we don't buy that ticket, then where do we get off asking God to help us win the lottery? We've got to buy the ticket. We've got to put in our efforts. If we put in our efforts, then we can ask Hashem for a huge assist and to help us make certain that our efforts will accomplish what we want them to accomplish. But we can't put it all on Hashem. We have to be the primary movers behind helping ourselves. That's what the Chafetz Chaim says there. I want to show you a very similar pasuk that we find earlier in the Torah in Sefer Shemos. It's in Parshas Mishpatim, and what the Kli Yakar says there, a very important Kli Yakar. It's along the same lines. So in Parshas Mishpatim, the Torah says, if I see my enemy's donkey, in other words, it's not even my friend, another Jew I see is, he's not someone I get along with. I see that donkey struggling under the burden. What do you think? That I should refrain from helping just because I don't like the fellow? No, azov tazov. I should surely get involved and help. But you see here, the Torah uses the same expression. Imo means with him, along with him. Meaning the case is the primary responsibility was on the owner of that animal. If the owner of the animal is doing something, then I've got to azov tazov imo. I've got to get involved and help. So look what the Kli Yakar says on this. Very similar to what we saw, that medrash that was quoted in this week's parsha. And what do I think? I could just refrain from getting involved? No, azov tazov imo. I should surely get involved and help. So he says, Lo Merlecha, what's the Torah telling us? Davka sherotza lios imcha b'malachto. The only time I have an obligation of azov tazov is if it's imo. If the owner is involved and the owner is going to give me a hand, then I have to get involved and assist him. He wants to help upright this animal. He wants to do the work with me. Then I have to help him. If the owner would just sit on the side with a cool drink in the shade, and he tries to say, since it's on you, the responsibility, the Torah says you have to help, you got to do the work on your own. If that would be the owner's attitude, there the Torah says, under that circumstance, yeah, I could refrain. In other words, if the fellow is trying to put it all on me, then I don't have to get involved. Himilas lo, when the Torah says v'chadaltu me'azov lo, and b'mashmuso imo, that doesn't mean do it together with him. Lo means if he wants to have me do it all by myself, then v'chadaltu me'azov lo. If he's trying to make me do it all by myself, I don't have to get involved. If the owner doesn't want to be involved, the owner doesn't want to help, so then I can walk away. I don't have an obligation to do anything. And this is a stern rebuke to some of the paupers in our nation. They completely put themselves on the public, meaning it's the public's responsibility to take care of me. And they don't want to do any work at all, even though they have the ability to engage in some type of work, some way to make a living, where they could bring some sustenance to their home. They say, I'm not doing a thing, it's the community's job to take care of me. The Koran Tagar, and they scream and make a fuss if the community does not take care of them. So this is a response to them. If that's their attitude, that they're not doing a thing to help themselves and they're just putting themselves totally on, it's the community's responsibility. God never gave such a command to Bnei Yisrael that we have to take care of somebody who totally abandons their own responsibilities. Only time we have to get involved is if we're working together with that person. Only if that person is making efforts to help themselves, then do we have a chiyav, an obligation to get involved and assist that party. This pauper needs to do whatever he or she can do to help themselves. And if despite their best efforts, they're not able to provide for themselves, and then every member of Bnei Yisrael has an obligation to try to support this person and to keep them upright and help them have whatever it is that they're missing. And get involved to assist them. I feel I may have even 100 times. So what the Kli Yakar is saying is very similar to what the Chafetz Chaim was saying. The Chafetz Chaim was saying in terms of our relationship with God, that we only can get off asking God for assistance if we're putting in our efforts to help ourselves. And then the Kli Yakar is saying that's not just true when it comes to God, That's true when it comes to the tzibur, when it comes to communal responsibility. The community, we're a community that's filled with chesed. We'll see about that soon. We're a community that's filled with kindness, and that's part of our hallmark about being members of Am Yisrael. But we can't let people take advantage of that. And we have to remember, this is almost saying practicing some form of tough love, is that we can't demand that a person be self-sufficient, but we could demand that the person at least is putting in the old college try. They're putting in an effort. If a person's putting in no effort whatsoever to take care of him or herself, to take care of their needs, then where do they get off asking the public to do that? The Torah says, imo, that I have to assist them in the work that they're doing. The Torah doesn't say I got to do this single-handedly. It means if they're already working towards that goal, we want to assist them. So it's a very important lesson. And again, it's telling us also about personal responsibility, that each and every one of us have personal, primarily, it's our responsibility to look after ourselves. If we're trying our best, we can't do it, then we could turn to others. But let's never forget who the responsibility primarily lies with. Now, I said that we're a people of chesed. We are a people of kindness. That's part of our DNA. It's part of our hallmark. There's something in our Parsha this week that drives home that lesson, just how important and how fundamental chesed is to our basic nature and our identity as members of Bnei Yisrael, as members of the Jewish people. Let's take a look a little bit later in the Parsha. In Parachav Gimel, the Torah tells us about our cousins. The Torah tells us, Lo yavo Amoni umoavi b'kahal Hashem, is that the pasuk literally says no member of the tribes, the nations of Ammon and tribe of Moab. Again, we know through Torah Shabbal Peh that means the male members. The female members are allowed in. That's how we have Rus. Rus was from Moab, and she converted, and she's an ancestor. She is the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. So Torah Shabbal Peh tells us that this Torah prohibition is limited to men, not to ladies. I'm just going to take a drink. So the Torah tells us, Daled, Lo yavo Amoni u'moavi b'kahal Hashem, no member, which we understand to be male members of the nations of Ammon or Moab, are allowed to join, are allowed to convert and join the Jewish people. Gamdor Asiri, even if after 10 generations go by, Lo yavo lahem b'kahal Hashem ad lo olam, they're never allowed in. Even after 10 generations go by, they cannot enter the Jewish people. Why? What is so bad about the male members of Ammon and Moab? So let's see, next pasuk, hey. Al devar asher lo kidmu eschem balechem uvamayim baderech b'tzeischem Mitzrayim. So number one is that when we were leaving Mitzrayim on our way to Eretz Yisrael, we passed by the lands of Ammon and Moab. They did not come as relatives. You would have thought the right thing to do is to come out and offer us something to eat, something to drink. They did not do that. They're cruel people. And second thing they did wrong, Asher Sachar Alecha is Bilam ben Beor Mipsor, Aram Naraim Lekalecha. They also, Moab was involved, and Moab and Ammon, they're always seen as sister nations. So Moab was involved in the hiring of Bilam, that mercenary prophet that was hired by Balak to come curse the Jewish people. So Moab had a big hand in that whole episode, and therefore, by trying to bring on Bilam, who would have cursed, and if it had been successful, would have spelled doom and gloom for the Jewish people. So because they wanted to bring him on board, so Moab can't come in. That shows what kind of a cruel people they are. Rashi quotes the Medrash and says there's really three things going on in this pasuk. Again, if we just looked at that pasuk, we see two crimes of Moab. We see that number one, they didn't offer us food and drink when we passed by their ancestral land. And number two, that they played a role in the whole incident of Bilam. Rashi tells us, quoting the Medrash, that there was actually a third thing they did wrong. Rashi's going on the words al-devar. Al-devar means because of the words. What does that mean, because of the words? The Medrash says, ala etza, because of the advice, sheyatzu eschem lachtichem. They gave advice to Bilam to cause us to sin. Meaning what? At the end of the Parsha, then the Parshas Balak, that's when they realize they can't get Bilam to curse the Jewish people. So what happens? The Jewish people end up sinning with the daughters of Moab and Midian. Well, who gave them this advice? To send their daughters on this promiscuous mission to get the Jewish men to sin. So the Medrash is saying, that's what it says here, al-devar. They gave advice. It was Moab who was behind this. Moab gave the advice that if you want to get the Jewish people, we couldn't get Bilam to curse them. So if you really want to mess them up, get them to sin with promiscuity, and that will get Hashem to hate them and to lash out against them. So it comes out from this Rashi Medrash, there's really three things that the people of Moab did to earn this distinction of never being able to join Am Yisrael. Number one, the pasuk says al devar. Al devar is a hint that they were the ones who were responsible for getting their daughters to go and sin with the Jewish men in this terrible promiscuous fashion, which brought about a plague which thousands of Jews died from. That's al devar. Number two, they didn't do something for us. When we passed by their land, they didn't come greet us with food and drink. They didn't do that. And number three, they played a role in hiring Bilam to come and curse the Jewish people. So there are three things, three strikes against the male population of Moab. That's what it comes out from this Rashi. A friend of mine who lives in Boca Raton, Florida, his name is Rabbi Shimon Feder. He runs a Jewish outreach organization called, I think it's the Jewish Educational Center of South Florida. So the other year, he wrote a wonderful book on the Parsha. It's called Psychology and Personal Growth in the Torah. And it was just published in 2021 by Rabbi Shimon Feder. And I enjoy it. I can't say I've read it cover to cover, but every now and then I look through what does he have on the Parsha, and I see he's got very nice pieces. So I want to share with you something very nice that my friend Rabbi Shimon Feder, we were classmates back in high school. We go back to when we were 13-year-olds. Shimon was from Chicago, I was from Cleveland, and we were classmates in Wits together. And then we went through yeshiva, Chafetz Chaim together as well. We go back to ninth grade in Wits. I remember going to his house for off Shabbos. Every now and then there would be a bus from Milwaukee going down to Chicago for Shabbos. There's a lot of boys from Chicago in the school. So I remember going to his parents, to his house for Shabbos on several occasions during high school. So Rabbi Shimon Feder, so he's got a beautiful idea on this pasuk. I want to share it with you. Let's look at it together. It's from page 207 in his book. According to Rashi, is expounded by Seitzei Chachamim, there are three reasons, and we just spoke them out, that these nations are banned from ever marrying in. One, they listened to the advice of Balaam to get the Jewish people involved in illicit relationships, ultimately causing a plague that claimed 24,000 lives, right? Thousands of Jews died at the end of Parshas Balak. That's the first thing they did wrong. Number two, they did not display proper etiquette of offering food and water to the Jews as they passed through their land. And number three, what's the third thing they did wrong in the pasuk? They hired Bilam to curse the nation as an attempt to destroy them. So there are three things that Moab played a role in damaging Bnei Israel. This Rashi is puzzling. The first and third reasons given to exclude an Ammonite or Moabite appear to be justified. Again, what was number one? They had this terrible idea about getting Jews promiscuous to sin in this fashion. They got 24,000 Jews to die. What was number three? They hired Bilam attempting to curse Jews, which again would have destroyed all of Bnei Israel. So I understand the big the big crimes of number one and number three. So back to Rabbi Feder, the first and third reasons given to exclude an Ammonite or Moabite appear to be justified. They attempted and later succeeded in wiping out many of our people, both spiritually and physically. The middle reason, however, seems illogical. The nation showed poor etiquette and lacked appropriate chesed, kindness, by withholding food and drink. But why does that exclude them from ever marrying a Jewish woman? Why can't they enter in? Those men can't enter into Klal Yisrael just because they didn't come out with cookies and milk? So he says, we learn from this Rashi that lacking basic chesed is no small matter. Amazingly, it's on par with the other two wicked crimes committed by the Ammonite and Moabite people. If a person is unaccustomed to kindness and his base nature is selfish, he lacks a core element of the Jewish soul. Because of this, he will not be able to marry into the Jewish nation, ever. As the Talmud in Yevamah states, all of Avram's descendants will inherently possess three qualities: modesty, compassion, and kindness. That's what the Gemara says. These are the hallmarks of anybody who's a descendant of Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah. We have to have these components into us. We are Rachmanim, we are Baishanim. Where Rachmanim means we're full of compassion. Baishanim, we have modesty. And number three, Gomle Chasadim, we have kindness. That's in our DNA, that's who we are. And what happened here? By Moab not coming out with Lechem and Mayim, not coming to offer us food and drink, they showed that they're lacking this basic trait of chesed. They're lacking. If that's the story, they can't join up with Bnei Yisrael. We are different people. They can't join us. So again, there were 3 crimes that according to Rashi, according to Medrash, that the pasuk says about Ammon and Moab. Number 1, they played a role in suggesting the terrible events at the end of Parshas Balak, that all those daughters of Midian and Moab sinned promiscuously with the Jewish men, and 24,000 died. That was their advice. Number 3, they hired Bilam. His attempt was to curse us and wipe us out. Those are awful. They tried to annihilate us, and to some degree, they were successful against 24,000. Those are huge. But if you're thinking at old Sesame Strong, one of these things just doesn't belong here. How do you say on par with that is the fact they didn't come out with cookies and milk for us? So Rashi, according to the Medrash, what he's saying is, yeah, that's on par. You're right. They may not have physically destroyed us. They may not have attempted to wipe us out with the curses of Bilam, but they displayed their basic nature. They don't have chesed, and part and parcel of being a member of Bnei Yisrael, of being a descendant of Avraham, Sarah, Rivka, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah, is to have chesed. It's in our DNA. It's intertwined in there. And if you're missing chesed, if they're missing chesed, these people of Ammon and Moab, they can't come in. They cannot be part of Bnei Yisrael. So you see here, and I think this is a beautiful point that Rabbi Feder was making. Sometimes we think chesed is just like the icing on the cake. Oh yeah, that's really nice. Oh, that person's great. And he or she, they've acted with chesed. It's not just icing on the cake. That's basic nature of what's expected of every Jew, is to be a Baal or Baalas chesed. That's who we are. And if we're lacking that, there's something at our core which is empty. And we're missing one of the essential strands in our DNA of what makes us into members of Bnei Yisrael. I thought this was a very good observation that Rabbi Feder had. It just reminds us of the important role that chesed plays and should play in our lives. And as we're in the month of Elul, if we see that we're not acting with enough chesed, we're not involved with enough chesed projects, let's try to get more under our belts. Let's try to get more in there, because part and parcel of who Bnei Yisrael is gomlei chasadim. We are people who are involved in chesed, in sharing kindness, and we want to make certain that's always part of who we are and how we identify ourselves, and this should be readily apparent. I want to share with you one more observation. I saw this is a little bit different, but I thought this was fascinating, and I think there's a strong lesson for us here too. So this is a parsha that contains so many different components, so many different mitzvahs, and they're not all related. There's some that clearly do flow one into the next, and then there's some that seemingly have nothing to do with the other. At the end of the parsha, one of the mitzvahs that we find out in here is the concept of Jewish divorce, that if a couple things really aren't working out, the Torah provides for this institution called divorce. A get, that's the name of the divorce document. We'll see in the Torah, it's not called a get, it's called a different word. But this idea of gerushin, this idea of divorce, is a Torah concept. And unfortunately, sometimes it's necessary. Let's see what the pasuk says. It's in chapter 24, that's Parachaf Daled, pasuk Aleph. Ki kach ish isha, husband and wife get married, they're intimate. Something goes sour in the relationship. They're fighting. It's a terrible relationship. Torah gives an example. For example, he discovers she's immoral, but there could be any number of reasons why this marriage is on the rocks. How does the marriage come to an end? Because of La Sefer Krisus, he writes a bill of divorce. That's how he translates it. Literally, it would mean the book of separation. Sefer means a book, and Krisus means to excise, to separate. So literally it means he writes a book of separation. V'nasan biyada, he has to hand it over to her. And he sends her out of the house. The couple, they split ways, they part ways. Beis, v'yatzami beso, she leaves his house. And then she could go on, she's single. She could perfectly go on and marry somebody else. And we all know friends, we all know family members, we all know people who have been through divorce. Again, it's sad, but sometimes it's necessary and sometimes it's absolutely crucial. That's the idea of divorce. Now we know that Rav Nata Greenblatt Zatzal passed away a couple of months ago. And in terms of items that put Memphis on the map, one of Jewish Memphis on the map, one of them is the fact that we had Rav Nata living in our community for close to 70 years. And Rav Nata was renowned world over as being an expert. It's very complex, the halachas of Gittin, the halachas of Jewish divorce. Rav Nata was known as an expert in this. And he personally was involved in helping thousands and thousands of Jewish couples obtain a proper Jewish divorce. The stories abound, and they will continue to be told of just how many people over the years, over the decades, how many people he was instrumental in helping them obtain a proper Jewish divorce, writing the papers. He was extremely, this was his area of expertise. I want to share with you a fascinating story about a great rabbi who was also very known about Gittin. I saw this week. Just again, this is very different, but I thought this was fascinating. So the person that we're going to be talking about, his name was Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky. There's a picture of him there from some of his younger years. Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky, he lived from 1886 to 1976. You see, he lived 90 years. He was a prominent, influential Orthodox rabbi. He was born and raised in the Russian Empire. He was a Litvak. He was from Lithuania, and he had gone through many of the famous Lithuanian yeshivas. He later headed the London Basin Rabbinical Court for 17 years. He was renowned. He had set up their Vada Kashrus. You see, there's a hechsher out there, the KLBD, London Basin Kosher. He was the one who had set that up. And then he did that for 17 years before retiring to Yerushalayim in 1951. So he spent the last 25 years of his life in Yerushalayim, and he was a fixture in many of the yeshivas. Remember, 1951 is right after the modern-day state of Israel was established. There were very few yeshivas in Israel, and in Yerushalayim especially, that's where he lived. And he was a fixture. The yeshivas loved having him. He was like a guest lecturer in many of the yeshivas. In the Hebron yeshiva, that was the offshoot of Slobodka, because he had attended Slobodka, also in the Mir yeshiva. The legends are abound out there about how the yeshivas in Israel at that time basically clamored to have him come spend time in the yeshivas, give shiurim, give lectures there, learn with the boys. He was a gem that they were happy to have after he retired from his post in London. And again, we said he spent the last 25 years of his life from 65 to 90. That's where he spent the last 25 years of his life in Yerushalayim. Look at this. This is something fascinating I found in Sefer Torah Ladas, an account, something happened with Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky dealing with a divorce when he was heading the Beis Din in London. So look at this. It's just a few short paragraphs. So he's going on this week's Parsha, V'kasav lo Sefer Krisos, where the Torah talks about the idea of writing a get. So look at this. He brings down, again, fascinating. Going to Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky, Siper, he once told over Odos Maisa, he told over a fascinating story, Shekaralo, that occurred to him. In other words, this was firsthand, he was involved with. He also Arosh Beis Din in London, when he headed the Beis Din in London. Pamba Lefnei, one time, who comes before him? Ish Vishto, a married couple comes before Rabbi Abramsky, Ubikshu, and they requested of him, L'sader lahem get. Write us a get, we've got to get divorced. Mitoch haskama b'nim. They both agree, they're at wit's end. This marriage can't endure. We cannot live with one another. We need to separate. We're asking you to write us a divorce. And they both agree. It's not like one party was trying to get rid of the other. This was unanimous. They both agreed this marriage has to come to an end. They had both decided they couldn't go on any longer. And they both were asking Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky to help them obtain a Jewish divorce. So here's what Rav Chatzkel says. He goes, I studied the face of the man, and I started to get a feel, that I've got a strong feeling, I've got a strong feeling, he says, that I know what the problem is, what's going wrong in this relationship. So here's what I said to them. He could have written them again on the spot, but he says, I want to try one thing. Martilam, he says to them, and here you'll see he stretched the truth. But the Torah, we have a saying in Chazal, Mutter l'shanos mipnei hashalom. A person's allowed to stretch the truth truth, if he's trying to establish peace. So look what Rav Chatzkel Abramsky says. He stretches the truth. Amarti lam, I said to them, if he seder azmanim, based on the schedules shall based in, if things are just too busy now, we're booked. We have appointments from today for a month. We don't have any time to write you this get. I can't do it for another month. So I'm requesting from the secretary, make a date. We'll make an appointment that in another month you'll come back, and that's when we'll take care. That's when we'll take care of this get. When the couple says, fine, we'll be back in a month for that divorce. When they got up to leave, I called the husband back by himself. I said, Charlie, I need to speak to you alone, just you and me. And I said to him as follows. I have one request from your honor. I have one request from you, sir, over the course of this next month. In the course of this next month, lo yichanes af pam. I don't want you entering even once lemitbach, into the kitchen, bizman habishol, at the time when your wife is preparing meals, levarer, because you're curious and you want to investigate. Ma ve'ech ishta mevashelas. What is it and how is your wife making the meal? Ella yechake b'savlanus. I'm asking you for the next month. Just wait patiently. In the dining room, in the area outside the kitchen, until lunch comes, until your wife brings out lunch. That was his one request of the guy. So then he says, when the date came a month later, lo hofiu bebestin, the couple never showed up. They never returned. So what's Rav Chatzkel Abramsky saying? He sensed something in this husband, that this husband, in the course of their conversation, was a domineering guy. He was in his wife's business. He was constantly jumping in, and he wasn't giving her any space. He wasn't giving her any kind of room. He was all over the place. He was micromanaging her. And that was the feeling that Rav Chatzkel got. And he says, I could see this in our conversation. This has got to be so destructive. This got to be so destructive to their relationship. So what does he do? He makes up this fib. He says, okay, we don't have any time right now. And for the next month, all our appointments are booked. You guys might got to make an appointment for a divorce in a month from now. And he gives this husband a job. For the next month, stay out of your wife's business. Don't be a micromanager. Stay out of your wife's business. That's what he tells this guy for the next month. And he gave him a very practical way to do that. Stay out of the kitchen. Your wife's busy doing whatever it is she needs to do. That's her space. That's her domain. Stay out of her hair. Just do that for a month. And what happens? The couple never showed up for their appointment again. So he took that to mean, and this is what he would tell people over, what he discovered from this incident is how destructive that is for a relationship to be a micromanager. We all need space. A wife needs her space. A husband needs his space. And of course, we want to be involved in one another's lives and show an interest in one another's lives. But there's a limit. After that limit, it's not healthy anymore. And when someone crosses that limit, crosses that border consistently, and they become a micromanager, and they're trying to be involved in the nitty gritty and analyzing everything that other party is doing, it's going to destroy a relationship. And that's what Rav Chatzkel Abramsky was saying to this fellow. Stay out of the kitchen for this next month. Back off. Give your wife the space she needs, and let's see what happens. And sure enough, they never showed up again to make that appointment to get that divorce. Now, I'm not saying this is the magic secret that's going to save every relationship, just telling a husband to stay out of the kitchen. And obviously, this isn't limited to the kitchen. This has so many other applications. The trial that Rev Abramsky was given this fellow was the kitchen, but there's so many applications to this. And I think there's just a really healthy lesson here, is that we're all in relationships with our spouse, with our children, with our parents, with family members. The only way that those relationships are going to remain intact is if we respect one another's boundaries. We're independent people. We all crave some degree of independence. If we step over those boundaries and we take away independence from that other party, we're going to breed resentment. So sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it just doesn't come natural to us to back off. Sometimes, especially on our personalities, I might be a manager personality and I want to micromanage all the people around me. It's just not healthy. And that's something that Rav Chatzkel was teaching us by telling over this story. So I don't know if any of us suffer from this problem. I'm sure some of us do in some areas, some in other areas. But here's something that we could all think about. We're in the month of Elul. We're looking to improve relationships, not just our relationship with Hashem, but our relationship with our spouse and our relationship with our other family members. This parsha we're going to read about is Sefer Krisus. We're going to read about the bill of divorce, and it's really incumbent upon all of us to say, yes, sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes breaks are necessary, but more often than not, we want to do whatever we can to save a relationship. And if we're looking to strengthen relationships during this time, let's look at ways that we can do this. And there are so many ways. Perhaps we need to show more affection towards the other party in the relationship. Perhaps we need to show more interest in what he or she is doing and what their interests are. We need to spend more time together. That's all true. Here's one aspect that Rev Abramsky is telling us to also focus on. Are we overstepping our bounds? Are we getting involved? Are we tied up in someone else's business more than it is appropriate? If we are, that can be really destructive. So this is a time during Elul to just assess our relationship with Hashem. And that first message from the Chafetz Chaim, to assess our relationship. I'm asking Hashem for a lot of things. Am I doing my part? It's a time for us to assess our relationship with others. I'm asking the community, I'm asking my friends for help, for favors. Am I doing my part? I need to do my part. And it's also time for us to remember how important chesed is, like we saw that idea from Ammon and Moab, that chesed is the hallmark. It's one of the calling cards of what does it mean to be a Jew. It's not just icing on the cake. It's one of our foundational pillars. We need to be ba'alei chesed. We have to be involved in chesed. And finally, during this month of Elul, we want to do whatever we can to strengthen our relationships with Hashem, with the people in our lives. And one of the ways to do this is by being careful to know what are our boundaries and not to overstep them. Hopefully, during this month of Elul, we will be successful in repairing and reestablishing and strengthening all the relationships in our lives and coming back to our original message. If we put in our efforts, if we show Hashem, I'm doing my part in strengthening my relationship with you, strengthening my relationship with my spouse, my children, my parents, my friends, whoever it may be. If I'm putting in my efforts, Hashem, please bless my efforts with success and also step in and share some of your efforts as well to make this successful. With that, I want to wish everyone a great day. I want to wish everyone a great day and also just a wonderful Shabbos. I hope this worked for everyone. Have a great